The Smoky Mountains are known to be a deadly place. Contrary to popular belief, most deaths in the Smokies occur from accidents. Medical emergencies and natural deaths happen all the time in the Smokies, but car crashes are the main culprit when it comes to the loss of human life. The two most deadly stretches of road in the Smokies are Newfound Gap Road and the Gatlinburg Spur. Between these two, thousands of people have been injured and hundreds killed. In the majority of accidents, drivers lose control, drive too fast, or are distracted. Rarely do these incidents happen for any other reason than happenstance or negligence. Unfortunately, stupidity and ego were the driving factors behind the single deadliest night on the Gatlinburg Spur. On a fateful night in March of 2005, two young men would be the cause of death for 5 elderly visitors driving along the spur. Their fragile egos would take them on a race through the spur that ended the lives of innocent people, leaving multiple families from both sides in pain. The Gatlinburg Spur is a 4-lane road that allows travelers to pass through the Smoky Mountains from Pigeon Forge to Gatlinburg. This roadway is extremely curvy and dangerous at all times during the year, but can be especially hazardous when it rains or snows. It took almost a decade for the spur to be fully completed, making it official in 1961. Prior to the end of construction, the first death on the spur had already occurred in 1960. For the next 50 years of the spur's history, the daily road averaged over 1 death a year. On the evening of March 26, 2005, the average would most likely skyrocket, as 5 people were about to meet the end of their lives on the spur. Call it fate, destiny, tragedy, irony, or however else you can make it make sense in your mind, but 2 young teenagers who had never met were about to create the deadliest car crash in the history of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. John Hall and Stephen Williams, 18 and 19 respectively, were 2 youthful teenagers with wildfire egos. While they weren't the first kids to race, they would be the first to face the consequences of a race on the spur. In town for Easter, the 2 teenagers were known to enjoy racing their cars whenever they got the chance. Little did they know, their lives would be forever intertwined in one of the most horrific ways imaginable. At about 10 p.m. on March 26th, the 2 teenagers pulled up beside each other at a red light on the north end of the Gatlinburg Strip. Williams drove a 1996 Nissan 240SX, and Hall drove a 1991 Honda Accord. The 2 began glaring at each other, telekinetically preparing the other for the race that was about to ensue. They revved their engines. Then they ripped off down the Gatlinburg Strip, tires squealing. According to witnesses, the racing duo was accelerating, decelerating, and changing lanes when they reached the straightaway at Legion Field Bridge. They were estimated to be traveling at a raging 80 miles per hour. Williams took the left lane and Hall the right as they blasted down the spur. Just about this time, a group of elderly visitors in a 1997 Chrysler sedan drove eastward across the northbound lanes of the spur. As they met the southbound lane, they were in front of the racer's path. Immediately, Williams mashed the brakes, able to come to a complete stop and avoid any damage. Hall, however, T-boned the elderly passengers as the Chrysler entered his lane. Glass shattered so fiercely that it broke Williams' passenger window in the other lane before he sped off and fled the scene. The group of elderly visitors' fates was sealed in that split second, a mere couple hundred yards away from their destination. The impact crumpled the Honda, but both occupants survived that were in the Honda. The Chrysler, carrying the 5 elderly visitors, was struck in the passenger side door as the 3,400-pound machine flew 80 feet down the road at impact. Quickly, rangers were on scene and immediately discovered that everyone in the Chrysler had passed away. 5 elderly people with ages ranging from 63 to 84 were gone forever. John Hall was transported to the hospital after the crash. He was caught red-handed as the cause of death of these innocent souls. During further investigations, he admitted to drinking alcohol and smoking cannabis earlier that night. But what about Steve Williams? He drove off into the night, fleeing the scene. Well, Williams returned to the scene in a different car to see what had happened. Clearly understanding that he had blood on his hands, his guilt eventually led him to surrendering himself to the police. The justice system was determined to make an example out of these 2 young street racers. Hall and Williams pled guilty to all charges. Hall received a sentence of just under 22 years, and Williams a sentence of 8.5 years. The deadliest car crash in the history of the park could have been avoided, not by the actions of the elderly, but by not allowing egos to prevail. The 2 teenagers, as most do, lived in that moment, and the decision they made to race will live with them for the rest of their lives.